He literally disappeared on a moving bus. I don't know if there's anything that can really explain that other than him falling through time and space, to be honest. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name is Kate Philpott and I cover true crime and missing person cases on my channel. Today is a bit of a different one. We're dealing with like an unexplained phenomenon type of video. I fell into not just one, not two, but about 10 different rabbit holes with this video, and it seems like these mountains have a pull. And you'll see what I mean by that as we move through this video. So this is the case, I guess, of the Bennington Triangle. Nestled in the heart of Vermont, a state known for its breathtaking landscapes and idyllic little towns, lies an area that is so mysterious it sends shivers down the spines of anybody who dares to go near it. The Bennington Triangle. This area covers Bennington, Somerset, Woodford and Shaftesbury, and in this area a lot of strange things happen. At the centre is Glastonbury, which is a mountain ghost town, which at one point exuded this charm and vibrancy and life, but oh how the tables have turned. Woo! What remains there today is nothing but a few dilapidated buildings and an eerie railroad system that pierces right through the heart of this dead forest. Well, the forest isn't dead. The forest is actually quite dense and it's just so remote and so isolated. Most people, even to this day that have been there, say that if you don't find this area intensely creepy, you probably have never been there. On that topic, if you have been there, let us know in the comments and let us know if you had any unusual experiences there. Many people end up running out of this forest, swearing that someone was watching them. People have reported sightings of a wild man. There are many unsolved disappearances and deaths, and there have even been reports of an 8-foot tall Sasquatch lurking behind the trees. Not to mention UFO activity as well. And like, that's a lot. There have even been mysterious plane crashes in this area. So a pattern emerged about 80 years ago in the Bennington Triangle that sent, honestly, shockwaves through the community. People started vanishing. And what made this even weirder is the disappearances all seem to occur between 3 and 4 p.m. and during the last 3 months of the year. So let's get into some of these unusual occurrences. So first we are kicking it off with the disappearance of Mitty Rivers in 1945. It was there in the Long Trail Road area and Vermont Route 9 that 74-year-old hunting guide Mitty Rivers, who was extremely skilled in navigating the outdoors, disappeared while leading a group of 4 hunters through the dense forest. Suddenly, while he was leading them, he started walking faster, leaving the others behind, and the hunters assumed he was rushing ahead so that he could make it to camp and have a warm fire waiting for them. But when the hunters reached the camp, Mitty was nowhere to be found, and there was no flickering fire to welcome them. It was as if he had just vanished into thin air. It's said that the location he disappeared from is an eerie crossroads where the lines between reality and the supernatural blur. Ooh, girl! Woo! And the news of Mitty's disappearance spread like wildfire, as you can imagine, particularly because if anyone was able to handle themselves in the woods like this, it was him. How could someone so experienced and with great survival instincts vanish without a trace like this? So an extensive search and rescue operation was launched, but despite their efforts, the only piece of evidence discovered was a single rifle cartridge. So the mystery deepened and the unanswered questions multiplied. So let's get into the next disappearance. The disappearance of Paula Jean Weldon. She was born on the 19th of October 1928, which made her 18 years old when she vanished from the Bennington Triangle. Coming from a pretty well-off family, her life should have been filled with this promise and opportunity, but her story took a dark turn when she went on a fateful hike that would change absolutely everything. At the time, Paula was a sophomore living in a college dorm, and she went out to the woods on the 1st of December 1946 on her own. Now, it wasn't her intention to go solo, but nobody else was available to go with her that day. So Paula entered the trail near Glastonbury Mountain. Again, she was pretty used to the woods and hiking, but what struck many people as odd was how light her clothing was. Although she was wearing a red coat, she wasn't quite prepared for the drastic drop in temperature that awaited her that night. And it didn't really seem like she was planning on staying the night either. So days passed, and obviously her classes resumed on the Monday, but Paula never showed up. From here, a massive search effort was launched, with law enforcement agencies and aircrafts joining forces to find her. And over 1,000 people scoured the area hoping to uncover some trace of her. But despite the exhaustive search, nothing was ever found. Witnesses recall seeing Paula. Some saw her running, others saw her casually walking down the trail. If she was running, what was she running from? Or was she running towards something or someone? Hold it there though, because there is one sketchy character in Paula's disappearance, and that's Fred Gadet. He had been in an argument with his girlfriend when Paula walked by, and in this jealous rage, he stormed off, leaving his girlfriend behind. When he was questioned, Fred lied to the police on multiple occasions, which quickly made him a person of interest. He even allegedly mentioned knowing where Paula was buried. But of course, he never said anything that led to any discovery. So, how much you want to believe that is up to you. So what happened to Paula in these woods? How was she never found? Like, are we talking about something human here? Or did the woods just absorb her somehow? Okay, now if you thought that one was strange, the next one will absolutely blow your mind. I always say people don't just disappear, right? But this guy, he actually did. Okay, this is the disappearance of James Tedford, which strangely enough took place on the 1st of December 1949, 3 years after Paula's disappearance to the day. Okay, but before I tell you about how 68-year-old James disappeared, let me first tell you about another weird thing that happened to him. All right, so before World War II, he had been living with his wife Pearl. James was recruited to the army and he had to leave to fight in the war. He and his wife had been in regular contact while he was at war, and he didn't notice a single problem in their communications. But when he returned, she was gone. And a meal was sitting out on the counter, either fully prepared and not eaten, or like half prepared, as if Pearl had just left in a hurry and she had taken none of her things with her. Really strange. So that's one thing. But let me tell you what happened to him. This is weird. James boarded a bus to Bennington after visiting relatives in St. Albans in Vermont. There were only 14 passengers on this bus, and they, as well as the bus driver, vividly remember seeing James getting on the bus and literally remembered what seat he was sitting in as well. Little did they know, something unbelievable was about to happen. As the bus made its way towards Bennington, James vanished into thin air. Poof! There was no trace of him when they arrived at their destination. Now, I know what you're thinking, okay? Surely he just got off the bus. Like, that's obvious. Well, no. Because they had seen him sitting there at the second last stop and not getting off. But by the time they got to the last stop, he was gone. Plus, his belongings, including his luggage and a piece of paper with the bus route and the bus times on it, were sitting in his seat. And James never came back to claim them. And he was also never seen again after that bus journey. It was literally as if he had vanished into another realm. And the witnesses on the bus stand by their stories that James vanished between stops, even though they know it sounds crazy. Sorry, how does someone disappear from a moving vehicle without it being super obvious, like jumping out the window or something? This makes no sense. Literally no sense. Despite extensive investigations, not a single lead has surfaced. And This is a frustrating one because chances are nobody will ever know what happened that day. Maybe James knows, but he's not here to tell us. Okay, so moving into our next one, it's a very intriguing disappearance that took place in October 1950. And it's a story of 8-year-old Paul Jepson. So Paul was out with his mother in the car when she stops to enter either their farm or a farm that she worked at because she had to tend to their beloved pigs. So she pulled over and left little Paul in the car. Now here's where things get peculiar. She's gone for over an hour, just a few hundred feet away. And when she glances back, she sees Paul in the car, laughing, seemingly having a grand old time. All was well, until it wasn't. Paul's mother turns around once more and Paul is gone. He's not in the car or anywhere near the car. Can you imagine the panic that she must have felt? And she hadn't heard the car door opening or closing, and apparently she was close enough so that she would have heard. A little weird. The community, of course, rallies together, and soon hundreds of people are out searching for Paul. Authorities did bring in a bloodhound, which picked up a scent as if Paul had gotten out of a vehicle and walked towards a trail near a crossroads, literally like on a main road. But the scent faded then, leaving everyone clueless. Could this have been foul play? For sure. I mean, it could have. He could have been taken from the car or even just taken at the side of the road by somebody driving by. There is a lot of room for something like this to have happened here. But here's the thing. Paul's father has a very different idea of what happened. Young Paul had been fixated on the allure of the mountains in the days leading up to his disappearance. And Paul even said himself that the mountains were calling to him. This is an 8-year-old child. And yes, like Paul loved the outdoors, but damn, that's intense. What mystical power do these mountains have? And Paul was never found, nor were any of his belongings, which was also weird because he too was wearing a red coat so that he'd be easy to find if he got lost in the woods. We're definitely left with more questions than answers in this one. So next we have the unusual disappearance of 53-year-old Frida Langer on a trail in Somerset. But this was the only one from those old cases that ended up with a body being found. We have Frida, a seasoned hiker, climber, survivalist, setting out on a hike in a familiar area of the woods with her husband and cousin. Or at least that was their plan. Frida's husband was nursing a knee injury from the previous day, so he stays behind at the campsite, while Frida and her cousin set off on this hike. Now here's where things get messed up. Just half a mile into the hike, Frida takes a fall into a stream and gets absolutely soaked. So she decides to turn back, head towards the campsite, dry off and get changed. They weren't even that far, so that's no big deal. However, as time passes and Frida doesn't return back from the campsite, her cousin gets a little concerned, naturally, and he heads then back towards the campsite. When he gets there, Frida's husband reveals that she never made it back to the campsite at all. So what happened to Frida in that half mile? That 10-minute walk? The authorities get to searching for Frida, and they had helicopters, the Coast Guard and the US Army, and even local aircraft from the community were deployed. This area was searched so thoroughly, but there was no trace of Frida. It is, again, as if she vanished into thin air. So fast forward 6 months, okay, and here's where things get even freakier. Frida's remains were found near Somerset Reservoir. Now this discovery raises numerous questions. Firstly, this was an area she wouldn't have been heading towards. It was not exactly on the route back to the campsite. And secondly, this particular spot had been searched at least 12 times before. And she wasn't found there before. It was an open area right under their noses. So how did they not see her? And it's not like they just did a bad job before, because first of all, they searched it at least 12 times. Like, surely they would find something. Second of all, she wasn't even well hidden. She was kind of thrown there. So was she moved? And if she was moved, how was she moved? Is a person responsible for this? She was pretty badly decomposed at this point. I don't know to what extent, but from what I heard, We're talking bones. How do you transport that? And it's not as if she survived for ages and ages because she was badly decomposed. There's not enough of a window for her to have been alive for like 5 months, let's say, and then suddenly shown up because she was so badly decomposed that she would have had to have been dead for a while. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't make sense. Plus, due to her state of decomposition, they couldn't find out a cause of death. So there's that as well. I will say, I was curious at first. Do we trust the cousin? I mean, she went out on a hike with her cousin alone and then never returned. So it's weird, but then how could he hide her for so long, and why would he move her after like 5.5 months? I don't know. I also had reservations about her husband as well, because he could have played dumb and said, yeah, she never came back. She never got back to the campsite. But that would have been riskier, first of all, because the cousin could have turned back at any point. And also, this husband, the only reason he wasn't hiking on this day was he had injured his knee. So he wasn't at full strength to be able to do something like this. Not to mention, how could he plan for her to fall into a stream and come back to change her clothes like that? Unless something went wrong between them. But I don't know. This one gets me because it doesn't really add up any which way. Now, moving on swiftly, there was a man who experienced the freakiness of the mountains who actually made it out. Let's call him Johnny, because frankly, I don't know his name. So he had a few strange experiences in one. First of all, as he was driving up the mountain, he saw this man far away with a gun over his shoulder, and this man was just standing watching him. I have chills. I wish I wasn't home alone right now. He didn't smile, he didn't wave, he didn't continue walking, he just stared. Talk about creepy. So Johnny continued up the mountain and actually passed a cemetery which had a campsite set up beside it. The tents were up, there were campfires that were apparently still hot, but no people. Johnny later claims that it was as if people had left in a hurry. Out of curiosity then, Johnny went into the cemetery to have a look at the gravestones. So he got out of his car but left the radio on at really low volume in the car. Then, okay, this part freaks me out a lot. He starts hearing something strange on the radio. Okay, and when he went back to turn it up, he heard 3 different voices. 3 people. They were speaking, but it wasn't English, it was just random babbling, and then it was switching to these piercing shrieks and screams, and then giggling. So naturally, he got in his car and flew down the mountain because, oh sweet Mary, Mother of Goodness, that is terrifying. Imagine hearing that when you're already creeped out by some man with a gun staring at you in the mountains and nobody's around. And an abandoned campsite because people left in a hurry. Oh no, it's just too much. It's just too much. Yeah. Interestingly enough, when he told people about it, other people started saying that they had experienced the exact same thing with their radios. Sorry, what in the world is going on in these woods? The f***? I need a sec before we move on to the next one. The next story was actually relatively recent. It took place in October 2008, and this is another survivor story. I like the survivor stories because you actually get to hear it from the person what went down. So 27-year-old Robert Singley went on a hike on a Sunday afternoon in the mountains. Robert intended on exploring the beautiful white rocks to the west, and as the sun starts setting, he decides to head back east to his car. But that's when things take a bizarre turn. After trekking for 5 miles, Robert realizes something isn't right, because it should have only been 3 miles back to his car, but his car was nowhere in sight. Bit of a predicament, especially because moving into the evening, the temperature drops. Again, guys, Robert was an experienced outdoorsman, and he was equipped with a headlamp, which didn't work in the mountains. Oh my god. At this point, he needs to find somewhere to rest for the night, and that's when he's lured in by this maple tree. It stood alone, and he said it was as if it was calling out to him in this vast forest. So Robert obviously struggled to sleep. I mean, I would too. But when he finally opens his eyes after sleeping for a while, it was sheer terror. He finds himself on the other side of the ridge, 7 miles away from where he was the night before. And here's the chilling part. He's in the exact same place where Paula Weldon, our other hiker, had vanished years ago. As Robert is looking around, he noticed something very eerie. This doesn't make sense. The remnants of his campfire were there from the night before, but everything around it had changed. All right, moving on to our last unusual death in the Bennington Triangle, and that's the case of Jessica Hildenbrandt. This one is very recent. So in late 2019, a man found what appeared to be a human jawbone at a gravel pit in the woods. And eventually, more remains were found nearby. Through DNA analysis, they discovered that these were the remains of Jessica Hildenbrandt. Jessica was a 43-year-old mother from Ballston Spa, New York, but she spent quite a bit of time in Bennington. The creepy thing about this is her body was found in the exact same spot that Frida Langer's body was found. But something that happened here was different from the other cases. They discovered that Jessica had been murdered. They just didn't know why. Jessica had been in a relationship with a guy named Devin Moffat from Bennington. He had been in prison for a while on something unrelated, right? It later came out though that in March 2019, Jessica had contacted authorities to say that she feared for her life if Devin were to be released from prison. She was interviewed as a result, but eventually she just stopped cooperating with the investigation. So authorities had exhausted all actions. Then, in a plot twist, Jessica posted bail for Devin in July 2019. And oh my goodness, this part. Forensic calculations determined that Jessica was killed in mid-July 2019. Wow. So in June 2022, he was arrested and charged with her murder. But the thing here is, I don't think this has anything to do with the whole lure of the mountains thing. I think it was kind of just a good place to hide a body because it's such a dense forest. Personal opinion. One weird thing though, Jessica's nickname was Red because of her bright red hair. So what's with all the red stuff going on? Because Paul Jepson was wearing a red jacket, Paula Weldon was wearing a red jacket, and her nickname was Red because she had red hair. It's a little weird. Some people think that that is a clue to something. I kind of think it's a coincidence, but as always, I'd love to know your thoughts. Let's have a little chat. This is a phenomenon with a whole host of theories from literally every angle you can possibly look at, because some of these disappearances are just inexplicable. So the first theory is that there's some kind of energetic force going on here. The lure of the mountains seems to be huge. Is this particular area a hotspot of unusual activity because it's a gateway between our universe and another universe? And these people fell through time and space never to return? I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like that theory. That I would actually kind of believe. But then why is it so selective? It's not like everyone disappears when they pass through there. Maybe the conditions have to be just right. Time of day, because most of them happen between 3 and 4 p.m. Time of year, because they mostly take place in the last 3 months of the year. Maybe a particular temperature or something like that. I don't know. But I really like that theory. Our next theory is the serial killer theory. Obviously, with a bunch of disappearances and deaths, particularly within that 5-year period of 1945 to 1950, it's going to be brought up that it was a serial killer, and maybe there was one. But how were they mostly never found? Even to this day. And also, these people were male, female, old, young. There was no specific demographic, which will be unusual for a serial killer. There's normally some kind of pattern. But then maybe there was a pattern that we're just not seeing. And even still, what about James Tedford? He literally disappeared on a moving bus. I don't know if there's anything that can really explain that other than him falling through time and space, to be honest. Does that sound crazy? And then another theory is the wildlife theory. I'll admit, one theory I was pretty keen on at the beginning was the wildlife theory, because like, of course, a bunch of people go missing in this hugely dense forest. It's got to be an animal of some kind. So I looked up what animals are present there, and these are the main things I found. Frogs, snakes, deer, chipmunks, beavers, bobcats. None of these are really fitting the bill for me. But then I did find one more. The black bear. Black bear attacks are apparently rare, but if you did run into one and you stumbled upon where, I don't know, the female keeps its babies or something, I'm sure it would get rid of you. Again, though, it doesn't explain James Tedford's story. So I'm going to open the floor up to you and your theories. Which of those theories are you leaning towards? Is there something else that you think could explain all of this? And would you ever go to the Bennington Triangle? Oh my god, we should do a group trip. Okay, I'm getting carried away. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, let's chat about it in the comments, and definitely don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss my future videos. If you enjoyed this one, you will love this one where I talk about actual, almost proven reincarnation cases. It's one of the most interesting things I think I've ever talked about on my channel. So watch that one next. Okay guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye, have a good one.